new candidate for U.S. House, a new national security podcast, and a new T-shirt shows up in church. From SDPB, today is Wednesday, September 17th. This is In the Moment. Coming up this hour, the Dakota Political Junkies offer this week's political analysis. We'll discuss a Christian T-shirt journalist Kevin Wooster saw in Catholic Mass recently. What does it mean for the separation of church and state as an idea and as a practice? We'll also look at the nuances or lack of nuance in political campaigns here at home. Later in the hour, NPR's Mary Louise Kelly is with us for a preview of her new national security podcast, Sources and Methods. But first, Democrat Julian Beaudion offers his thoughts on how listening to voters can help move his campaign for U.S. Senate forward. We're broadcasting today from SDPB's Kirby Family Studio in Sioux Falls. I'm Lori Walsh. You're In the Moment, and news is first. You're listening to In the Moment on SDPB. I'm Lori Walsh. Sioux Falls business owner and community leader Julian Beaudion is running for U.S. Senate. The Democrat is challenging current U.S. Senator Mike Rounds for his seat in Congress. Beaudion joined me in SDPB's Kirby Family Studio in Sioux Falls to discuss why he is running. Julian Beaudion,
yes.
Welcome back to In the Moment. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back.
You have been on this show throughout the years in a variety of capacities as a community leader, as a business owner, as someone who works with African American History Museum and leads that organization. And now you are running for the U.S. Senate.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about why you decided now was the time to make that leap.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's really no better time than now, in my opinion. There's, with the things that I've done in the community, as well as some of the recognition that I've been able to get nationally. I was recognized as one of the 100 most influential young leaders across the country by former President Obama. Went through his leadership program. And so after going through that Presidential Leadership Academy, it really opened my eyes to really what's next in politics. I've always kind of dabbled in politics, whether it was lobbying or going up and maybe doing some interviews with some legislators just to ensure that, folks are best representing people here in South Dakota. I've always had my finger on the pulse, so to speak. And so after this program, it really opened my eyes to running for office again. I know I ran for city council back in 2019, leading into 2020. And that was, the year of COVID. Everything was different. And so my wife and I talked through it and figured out which position best fit right now, best fit my skill set, best fit, of course, the things that I've done in the community. And this was it.
Tell me a little bit about your background, because I was looking at your campaign website. From your parents, you learned compassion and discipline, which sounds like a very South Dakotan combination. Although, you're not originally from South Dakota. You weren't born here.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit of your upbringing, your family, and what brought you to South Dakota originally.
So my mother is a retired nurse. She actually was a psychiatric nurse with the VA. And so that discipline really comes from her being around service members, her entire career. And then me growing up, just being around service members as well. I'd also give a little bit of that discipline to my father. He was a retired teacher. And so he was stern. He stayed on my butt, making sure that I studied, making sure that my memory was good, and that I was always doing the right thing even when no one was looking. So, the compassion part, though, just comes because my mom was a caregiver. My grandmother was a caregiver. And when I tell you, when I went into law enforcement, all of these people in my family who were caring for people or educating people, they looked at me and they say, well, what are you doing? You're not a teacher. You're not going into medicine. But that really gave me a combination of the two things that I was raised to be. And when you talk about what brought me up here to South Dakota, my mom retired at the time, and so I was playing basketball in college, ended up tearing my knee. And I don't know if you remember way back in the day, I'm kind of aging myself, I'm not too old, but way back in the day when we had the in-network, out-of-network coverage in our healthcare system, I was on my mom's insurance, and so I had to come and have some in-network surgery done. And that's how I ended up in South Dakota and just ended up staying.
Yeah. Tell me about your law enforcement career.
So I spent 13 and a half years as a state trooper. And during that time, the first 3 years was out in Pierre. I talk about it like it was a sentence myself, but I did time in Pierre for 3 years. And then I came back to Sioux Falls and spent the rest of my career here. During that time, though, again, like because of the community work, but also because of the work that I had done in the community or in uniform, by being cross-deputized as a federal agent, and then also doing some work on reservation land, doing some work with the FBI with the CEI initiative with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Sure. I was recognized by the state to be one of the individuals who was up for U.S. Marshal, which eventually I became the state pick for U.S. Marshal as well. And so after that, of course, that was during the Biden administration. Biden no longer is president. And so here I am left to fend for myself, so to speak. And I dove right back into the nonprofit world.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the lessons that you learned from law enforcement, about public safety, about what's happening at the southern border, about our response to it. What are some of those lessons that you take on your way to Washington, should South Dakotans decide to send you there, that you can specifically tie back to your time in law enforcement?
Yeah, well, I think the responsibility is always back on the people who are serving. It's a choice. It certainly is a choice. And I would always tell folks in uniform, the individuals, because part of the time I helped out with training, and so I would always tell the younger people coming in as troopers that you can't best serve a community until you best understand the community. And so for me, stepping into, the roles of nonprofit work and community advocacy and sometimes even activism really helped me understand the people that we were serving. And so that way, when you put the uniform on, you can be the best representative possible. And that's what I hope to bring to D.C. Just my finger is on the pulse. I'm still doing the nonprofit work. I'm still serving on several boards. I intend to continue to have communication with those boards and the people in South Dakota to make sure we're serving them the right way.
Yeah. As you travel around and listen to what people want out of their U.S. senators, what are some of the things that are coming up for you?
Well, I'll tell you the three main topics is the things that we're hearing, I think, all over the country, to be honest with you. Yeah. Medicaid is one of the biggest things we hear over and over again. But, probably neck and neck with that is the dismantling of the Department of Education. There are some big concerns around what that looks like for South Dakota. The promise right now, of course, is that, the funding resources will come from somewhere else. However, the reality is our state can't even afford to feed the kids now. And so where's that resource going to come from once the department is gone? We're talking about after-school programming. We're talking about kids in special education. These are our most needed resources for the kids that are in education. And so for me, it's about reinvesting in education. It's not about dismantling. What we see around the country is in places like Maryland and Illinois, there's been a reinvestment, an intentional reinvestment in education. And so that's increased high school graduation rates, but it's also decreased crime rates. Those things go hand in hand, and I plan to do the same thing here.
Do you think U.S. Senator Mike Rounds is vulnerable to a Democratic challenger right now? Where do you see that vulnerability?
I think Mike Rounds is vulnerable, period, whether it's a Democrat, independent, or Republican. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he's done here recently is he just tied himself to the presidential administration. And it's important to remember that you don't serve a president, you serve the people. And when he started losing sense in that, that really kind of not only opened my eyes, but I think it opened the eyes of a lot of Republicans as well to say, maybe we need to choose a different representative.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how you intend, because one of the biggest problems or challenges for Democrats running in South Dakota is to not be tied to the national party leadership.
Yeah.
They're going to tie you to Biden. They're going to tie you to Obama.
Yeah.
They're going to tie you to Clinton, to anything that, people don't like about the national party. They're going to tie it to your campaign.
For sure.
What's your relationship with that?
Well, we're South Dakotans, and so we represent South Dakotans the best way we possibly can. And I will say, yes, I have had conversations with folks like Obama, and I've had conversations with folks in the national DNC, on that level, because it's going to take the resources from the national level to be able to win a race like this. Again, that's the reality of it. But also, when I'm having those conversations with them, I make sure that they understand that this is not Washington, D.C., right? This is not New York City. This is not California. We are a different brand of people here. And if you are going to help with those resources, you need to recognize that, we are an environment of agriculture. We're an environment of tourism. And so the things here that matter to us as South Dakotans certainly look different. And so we have to make sure that we are investing in the things that matter to us most.
Yeah. Democrats like George McGovern were able to find an unpopular ag policy from the current presidential administration of their time, and then listen to what farmers wanted and bring a new farm policy to Washington.
Yeah.
It seems to me with the tariffs right now that even amongst the farmers who are the most supportive of President Donald Trump, they're being hurt by trade agreements and tariffs, and they're willing to speak openly about that.
Yeah.
What is your message for farmers and the ag industry to say, like, there could be a different vision and this is what it is?
Well, I think one thing we have to do is, again, we do have to go back into history to see what farmers have been fighting for a long time and have not received yet from our our current representatives. One of the biggest things that I'm hearing over and over is actually a country of origin label. That really would help out our farmers and our ranchers a ton. We talk about the price of corn and grain right now being the lowest that a lot of these farmers can remember in their generation. And one of the things that could help fix that is just really understanding where your food comes from. That also helps the situation on taxes because, of course, if you know where it comes from, you know where to buy it from. But those tariff situations, who pays the taxes on that? That's really us. That's not the country that we're placing the tariffs on. And so understanding how those two things can tie together certainly can be beneficial to farmers. And we've had several conversations with folks with the South Dakota Farmers Union about just that, how we can push that type of narrative to make sure that we are reinventing what the farm bill looks like. Because, we've been trying to get a farm bill passed for I don't know how long. Well, farming changes, especially because of things like AI, for example. Farming changes on a year-to-year basis. And so we have to make sure that we're reinventing who we are as producers, but we also have to make sure we're reinventing who we are as policymakers to make sure that the farm bill passes the right way.
You mentioned advocacy and even activism, and I think back to 2020, and you were one of those people who was a law enforcement officer, but who was also showing up after the killing of George Floyd to speak openly with people and on behalf of people to say something needs to change in law enforcement. That was an interesting place for you to be in at the time. I am quite sure your opponent will bring that time up as an example of, activism and anti-law enforcement rhetoric. How do you intend to respond to what 2020 was like in South Dakota, the pushback that we've seen since then, and the work that you see needs to be done ahead?
Well, so as a matter of fact, I hope he does bring it up because, yes, it was an interesting time in my life, but it also allowed me to step into a place to where, leaders are folks who are not always agreed with. Real leaders are not folks who are always agreed with, but they always step into roles of accountability. And when you understand that things are not being done the right way, whether you're in uniform or in the community, you want to make sure that, again, you are serving people the way they need to be served. And so that was an unjust murder by someone wearing the uniform. And you're right, I was one of very few law enforcement officers to be able to publicly stand up and say something. However, there was a lot of conversations behind the scenes. We would not have had a crime bill introduced had it not been for law enforcement officers speaking behind the scenes. And so this was something that was necessary during that time. But, I don't always just speak out against law enforcement officers. I also speak out against community members who are not holding up their end of the bargain. Accountability looks different in many different ways. And one of the things that I always say is that it takes courage to be a real leader. And one of the things that we're seeing out of Mike Rounds right now is certainly not courage, is more of a coward act, in my opinion, because he doesn't have the courage to hold anyone accountable in D.C. But even more important than that, he doesn't have the courage to be held accountable by the people of South Dakota. We've done about 7 or 8 different town halls to where I'm putting myself in front of the voters, putting myself in front of the citizens. And every single time, I don't make any promises to them because promises can come out empty. But I do ask for an expectation, and the expectation I have of those folks is to hold me accountable, and I will continue to consistently stand in front of those folks when I'm not serving people the right way.
That was Julian Beaudion. He is running for one of South Dakota's 2 U.S. Senate seats. He's currently the only candidate who has formally announced his candidacy. We'll keep you updated as the race continues to shape up.